In the next couple of lectures, we're going to be unwrapping this rocket. In this particular lecture, I'm just going to be fixing some of the problems. There's a lot to do, so I'm going to jump right in. First of all, I want to get rid of these lamps and cameras, so they don't really need to be here. I'm just going to delete those. Another thing I want to do is turn the smooth shading off, because I prefer to see everything in flat shading. This is more like the actual geometry that we're dealing with. Let's turn on backface culling so that we can spot any problems with the flipped normals. And I remember that there was a flipped normal down here, so let's go ahead and fix this right away. So I'm going to go ahead and select that edge right there. Let's get a closer look here. That edge, and just face fill that. That fixes that problem. There's quite a few more problems to fix here. Technically what needs to happen here is I want this whole rocket to be flipped so that it's facing forward. Right now I'm in front perspective. Let's put that in ortho view. And I want this bubble to be facing the front. So right now it's facing the side. Rotate on the Z 90 degrees. We'll fix that. Also, the rocket needs to be on the ground, not underground, and centered on this blue line on both the front and the side. So we're going to do that. But I don't think just eyeballing it's going to be good enough. When you zoom in very, very close on this fin, you'll see that it doesn't line up with the fin behind it. I want these to be exact. So it's very important that they're snapped not only to the very center, but also centered with each other. So what I want to do is delete 3 out of 4 of these shapes. So I'm going to go to edit mode to do that and use my face selection tool and link select all of the fins except the front fin. I want the fin that's on the bubble side to remain behind. So I'm selecting these 3 fins and leaving the front fin. Delete the ones that are selected. Great. Back to object view and front ortho and zoom in really, really close to this fin. And I'm going to grab it and move it on the X so it's closer to that blue line, and grab it on the Z closer to that red line. I'm not done yet. I'm going to zoom in even closer. Okay, so grab it on the X, move it towards the blue, grab it on the Z, move it towards the red. It's pretty much right on right now. So let's go and turn to the right ortho view. We're going to do something very similar. This time we're going to line up this central edge right here of the rocket with that blue line, which indicates the center of the world space. Same kind of thing. Grab it. This time we're moving it on the Y to the blue line. And notice I'm staying in right ortho view the whole time. I'm zoomed in as far as I can go. Now I'm going to grab this and move it on the Y so it's snapped perfectly with that blue edge right there. So now if I look at this in right or front, it's perfectly centered. Also, if you look at it in top view, it's perfectly centered in the middle. With that done, let's go over to our object tab here and notice that the location and the rotation need to be basically reset. If I were to type these numbers in right here, it's going to move the object around. I don't want that to happen. So what I need to do is Control A to reset the location for starters. That sets everything to 0, but it moves the origin to the middle of the world space. Likewise, I want the same exact thing to happen with the rotation. So again, Control A and apply the rotation. It sets all the zeros back down to here, but it sets the rotation so that it's basically resets it. This is now perfectly aligned, and I'm happy with this. There's 2 more things I want to take care of before I end this lecture. One of them is I want to eliminate any unnecessary geometry in that fin, and I want to rebuild this piece right here that goes around that glass piece, because this trim doesn't line up with that glass piece at all, and I want it to line up perfectly. So we'll start here and hide everything else and start working on this piece. We want this to be perfect. The inside area here that's actually inside the rocket, we don't really need any of this geometry, so I can just delete it. So I'm selecting all of this here and Control plus sign to select linked, and basically grabbing a little bit more than I need, and then I'm going to unselect what I want to keep. These are very small areas here, so it's really hard to notice whether you have that edge selected or not. So just do a close inspection. Make sure that you have all of this stuff selected just right, just like that. And what we want to do is delete all of those faces. Well, that's the first step. Let's go to edge selection and start removing some unneeded geometry. So for example, this edge right here, it's not really doing anything. It's not adding to the shape of this at all. If I were to dissolve this edge, this would be exactly the same shape. Here's a really good example, okay? Not sure? Take a look at it. If this face right here on either side of the edge is going to be the same if I dissolve the edge, then it's probably safe to dissolve the edge. And if you look around this whole shape, it's like that all the way around. So let's go ahead and do a little dissolve test on this. Hit delete. Don't delete anything. We want to dissolve the edge. If it maintained the shape of the object after the edge is gone, then it's safe to dissolve that. And you'll kind of get a feel for this the more you do it. So I'd encourage you to come in here and actually start practicing this. I'm going to select those two edges just to give you an idea. Let's zoom in a little closer. Those are the inside edges. They're not really doing anything to add any feature or any shape at all to this object. These two are not doing anything. So I'm going to dissolve all of those and just set up your camera angle so that you can see what's going to happen as a result of removing those, and just go and dissolve edges. If anything changed, if the shape of this changed dramatically, then you might want to undo and try something different. So for example, let's say we were thinking about dissolving this edge here. We weren't sure. Then set up your camera so that you can see everything. Go ahead and do a dissolve. And in this case, it looks like we lost all that beveling. So let's go ahead and undo to restore it. And so now we know that we can't really dissolve that edge. There's a couple more edges here, like this one right here. Not sure if we can dissolve that or not. Well, let's do a little dissolve test. Dissolve edges. And it looks like it's probably pretty safe to get rid of that as well. I think I've got, well, we could probably get rid of this too. Let's try it. Yeah, that's a safe dissolve. So now I think I have everything that I need, and now we can move on. So let's go ahead and unhide and move on to the trim. I'm going to link select the trim and separate the selection. Just like that. Go back to object mode. I'm just going to hide this for now. I'm not actually going to use the hide tool. I'm going to move it into another layer because I'm going to be turning hide on and off constantly, and I don't want that to keep coming up and then having to hide it again. So I'm just moving it into another layer as another means of hiding it. So here it is, and here's the rest of our objects. So the next step is going to be to take this glass piece here and basically separate it from the rocket, and then we want the edge of the glass to be in perfect alignment with the rocket. And I'm going to show you how to accomplish that right now. Let's go into edit mode and find those edges. So I'm going to link select the glass and hide everything else. You'll notice that those edges were disappearing into the geometry of the rocket, and now we can actually access them. I'm going to make them go a little bit deeper into the rocket just to make this easier to deal with. And then face fill so that we have a nice solid object now. We're going to need a solid object to use the Boolean modifier. So now let's go ahead and select all here and separate this selection. So the glass is now its own object. Let's unhide the rocket. Let's go back to object mode, I guess. And now we have a glass piece and we have the rocket, two separate objects. At this point, because I'm using the Boolean modifier, it's a good idea to name these objects so we don't get confused. So I'm going to name this rocket, which seems fitting, and I'm going to name this glass. With the glass selected, go over to our modifiers and choose Boolean. Put it on difference for the operation and choose rocket. That's what we're cutting away. We're basically cutting the difference of the rocket away from the glass. Go ahead and hit apply, and that's done. So now we can just grab the glass here, go into edit mode, and you can see that now the edge of that glass goes perfectly around to the surface of the rocket. That's going to come in handy in the next step. So let's go back to object mode. And I think what I'm going to do is just temporarily hide the rocket. And let's focus just on the back side of this glass piece. In edit mode, using the face selection tool, I'm going to select on one of these faces with the right click, and then lasso select on all of the other faces so that I have only the back side selected. And then I'm going to delete those faces. Now I'm going to switch to the edge selection tool and select the entire perimeter of this object. Now this is actually a little tricky because some of the edges here are very, very small lines. So you want to make sure that you get the whole thing. Otherwise you're going to end up with some spacing that's going to be really hard to fix later. So make sure you get this right the first time. Go back to object mode for just a moment. Don't worry, that will still be selected when you come back to edit mode. And let's go ahead and take a look at what we're actually trying to build right now. This is the trim that we temporarily removed. And if we look at this with the rocket ship, that's basically what we're trying to design right now. So you can see it's basically got 1, 2, 3, 4 faces around the front of this, okay? So if you take a look at this, basically it has almost like a cylinder or a torus around the edge of that. We're going to be recreating that now. So back to edit mode, and hopefully that's all still selected. Make sure. We're going to start creating that trim now. So extrude and then scale, and kind of just remember that shape that we just had. I'm looking over here, by the way, and I'm trying to set that up so it's about the same width as what I saw in that torus. And then scale on the Z afterwards to line up the tops and the bottoms so that that this whole trim is about the same width all the way around. Then let's turn this over to the side. So I'm in right ortho. I'm going to zoom in a little bit and make this go out like this. Maybe about half the distance of this rectangle right here. Let's go back to front view and repeat that first step. Extrude and then scale about an equal width. And again, you want to balance out the tops and the bottoms by scaling only on the Z to make it a little bit more even all the way around the edge. Something like that. Let's go back to our right view. This one should be pretty much even with the other edge, so I'm just going to move it over so it's closer. Doesn't have to be perfect. Repeat again. Extrude and scale. So we have another face that we're creating. Let's go to our right view again. And this time we're going to pull it back almost all the way. Probably 3/4 of the way back like that. Back to front view again. We could probably scale the Z. I think I skipped that step, but scale the Z down if you want to, just to balance out the shape. And we got one more. Extrude and scale one more time. And I should have probably zoomed in a little bit, so let's get a closer look. So scale it so it's about the same as the others. Let's go to our right side, right ortho view, and pull this back deep into the rocket. At this point, we can actually scale it inwards so that it kind of curves in like that. Because it's basically connecting inside of the rocket, and it's completing this curvature. Let's go back to object mode and just compare. So this is the before and after. So they're very close in design. They're about the same size, but the big difference is this new trim follows the exact shape of the glass. So there's not going to be any gaps or holes or any problems inside of there at all. So at this point, I can now delete this piece. I don't really need it. I only saved it because it was a guide. So the glass, the trim is done. Let's go ahead and unhide everything else. I don't think I really need to fix anything else on the rocket. I already filled in the bottom. Let's just take another look. And I think, looks like we might have an extra edge here that we can probably dissolve. So I'm going to go ahead and dissolve that edge right now. Let's see if there's any others. There's probably another one right here that can probably get dissolved without changing the shape of this too much. And There's another edge right there. Could probably do all of these at once. Here's one right here. Another edge right there that we can dissolve. Here's another one. This edge right there can be dissolved. And finally that one right there. So let's just go ahead and take a look from afar. Make sure that we can see all the edges that are going to be affected, and go and dissolve them all at once. And it looks like it's retained the shape, which is the important thing. Looks like there's actually another one inside here. So I'm going to dissolve that too. Now that we've fixed all the problems that I can think of, we're ready to actually join all these pieces together. So it's a good idea to select the rocket first and then select all, because the rocket will be the active object. And then when you Control J everything together, that's join, it will take on the name of the active object. So this whole thing is now called rocket. I can go into edit mode and select any piece of this, and it's all considered the rocket right now. Alright, so that's pretty much all the problems that need to be ironed out, at least as far as I can see. And now we're ready to start unwrapping. So, how did you do? Did you fix some of the same problems? Did you find other problems that I didn't pick up on in this lecture? Maybe you fixed them, but you went about doing it a different way. The whole point of this is so that you have something to compare your experience with. So if that's what you're doing, you're going to get the most out of this course. So I want you to go in and try to unwrap it on your own without instructions. And then after you've given it a solid go, come back and we'll compare notes in the next lecture.